me and made me not unjust and ungrateful to my mother. When the baby spoke, the people all around them, they knew that this is not an ordinary thing. So she was cleared from the accusation of adultery. If that wasn't happening, and if she said, God gave me the baby, who would believe in her? Because you don't have babies from nowhere. No one believes in her. So the Quran says this is exactly what happened, and that's why you don't find people accusing Mary of unchastity and so on. And the whole history of their literature bombarded with totally belittling her.
See,
you won't find that.
I didn't know those facts were in the Quran
Yes.
as well. I didn't know that.
If you ask now, how does a Christian find how she defended her? You will not find information. The Quran gives you fresh information, things will happen. So when he said, I am a slave of God, slave of Allah, they knew that yes, this is a prophet to be. And they didn't, disbelieve in them.
Yeah.
As he grew up later, and then he came up with so many things, he did miracles, he even told them what's in their houses in terms of provisions. No one knew apart from them, but he could tell them. So they had to deal with him. So at one point when he was overturning the religious and social political order, because they were engrossed in injustice, in so many things, and he came to put them back to straight to the words of God, the laws of God, they didn't like him. That's why they were plotting to kill him, but they didn't succeed. So the Quran says they did not succeed, God raised him up. The Quran says about Mary, how she is one of the pious women. God favored her from the woman of the worlds. A Jewish woman, Quran is praising her. Prophet being an Arab, to the Arab people, how can you do that? But yes, the Quran does not justify that, because this is how she was raised, and she was in her chastity and piety and righteousness. So a whole chapter in the Quran, you will find in the Quran, called Surah Maryam, chapter of Mary.
Right.
Why? So that the Christians can reflect and say, look, this is your continuation of your tradition or your message that you believed in. And God has now given you another messenger. Believe in him so that you can be successful in the hereafter and have good life here too. But if you didn't persisted on leaving this new message, like some people said, I'm going to believe in Mosaic and Noahide laws, how are you going to justify in the Day of Judgment? So the Quran is inviting all people of this scripture. This is an honorary title, because they had scriptures before. The Torah was given to Prophet Moses. The Injil or the Gospel was given to Prophet Jesus. Peace be upon them both. And this makes them distinct from the people who didn't have books. So it's an honorary title, and the Quran says, all people of scripture, remember the favor of God upon you, that God saved you from this, remember this, and a whole load of teachings to bring them back to the teaching of God. So the Quran addresses Muslims directly, or you believe, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Quran addresses mankind in general, Ya ayyuhan nas, all people in general. Quran addresses the disbelievers who are arrogant. Ya ayyuhan, it says, do not the unbelievers see. أَوَلَمْ يَرَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. Do not the unbelievers who don't believe in God or in the Quran see. Quran addresses various types of people, and it reasons with them, because God reasons so that you don't just have a blind faith. And what is so interesting for you to learn from this exchange of ours, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they knew for 40 years for his life, when he didn't declare himself to be a prophet and messenger of God, to be someone Sadiq al-Amin, a truthful, trustworthy individual. They could leave their possessions even after he became a prophet. His enemies would leave it. Can you? And you know how people used to, like nowadays, you put your what's it called, pricey things, very expensive things in the bank vault.
Yeah.
They would leave on the Prophet in his house for the security.
Yeah.
Even though they don't believe in him, they accept that he will be trustworthy and truthful. He would never break his promise and never take away from what they have entrusted with him. So at one point, when he became a prophet, God chose him to be a prophet. So he came to one of the mountains, up to the people and says, look, in the mountaintop, says, look, if I told you behind the mountain there's an army to attack you, would you believe? They says, we will believe in you, because we know you are always truthful. Then when he said that, now believe that I am a messenger of God, come to tell you to worship none but God. Stop worshipping your idols. Then they said, oh, we don't believe in you. Okay? First they said we believe, and they didn't believe. But at least their own admission was that even to this point, they accepted him to be one truthful. So that was his character, the number one. Secondly, when he came with the Quran, they knew that he was not someone who is a learned individual who could read and write. They have people who are their best literate individuals, best poets. Because Arabs at that time, before Islam, they boasted in two things. One is a generation or production of a good poetry, and the next thing is the birth of a boy baby, a son. When a baby girl was born, they will be all black, and they'll say, how am I going to now? Because they have to, it's a liability. They even buried some of their daughters alive. When the Quran says, for what reason did you bury your daughters alive? What are they going to say? The Quran came to abolish that whole system. So they knew the Prophet for 40 years, he did not read or write, and there were people who were masters in their language. When the Quran came, those people were Quran rhetorically or impractically asked them, if you don't believe, bring a book like it, or bring 10 chapters like it, or bring a chapter like it. And the smallest chapter is about إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ. Oh, only 3 sentences. And the Quran says, if you so think this is not from God, bring a chapter like unto it. If you can't do it yourself, bring your helpers and anyone else in your aid to do that besides God. And if you cannot do it, and the Quran says, surely you'll never be able to do that, then fear the hellfire whose fuel is man and stones. So the Quran challenged their masters, the what's it called? The professors of those times. If you really think this Quran is from this man, you should be able to do it, because he is an illiterate, not someone who's able to read or write. You are the ones excelled in your language and poetry. Bring something like it. This is a linguistic challenge of the Quran, where even to this day, Muslims, scholars will say, why is it even today people are unable to bring? There are many things in the internet. They will find, a surah, a chapter like it, and you will see that they're not imitating anything. Because the Quran says, imitate something like it. When I say, I'll show you what I mean by bringing something like it. If I say bringing something like my umbrella, you're not going to bring an umbrella which is that short, is it? And made of wood. You're going to bring something like this kind of nature, to, this length and this, and operate it, of that nature.
Yeah.
So the Quran came in the Arabic language, but it had its own linguistic genre, stylistics, which the Arabs realized that they do not know anything of that. They know how to do poetry. You know Shakespeare's poetry, like sonnet?
Yeah.
It has a specific rhymes and meters. Yeah? How many lines, how many words in one form. Many forms of poetry. Arabs had 16 types of poetry. They called bihar, rajas, tawil, madid, and khafif. Like this, various specific rhymes and meters. How it ends, like la 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 la, la 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 la. You see what, for example, if you're going to write a poetry of that form, you have to write it in that form. Quran came unlike any of that. It's a totally unique genre. How do they replicate it? They have to understand the language of the Quran. So when they see a surah, they cannot imitate it. To give you an example, when the Quran says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, the word Alameen at the end is elongated. To them, how can you even say such a word? Alameen means worlds, multiple worlds. But to the Arabs, in their linguistic corpus, there is only one world. That's all there is. There is no such thing as many worlds. It's a nonsense. When the Quran came and said, no, God, all praises and glory and thanks to be the God, Lord of all the worlds, it's introducing you of multiplicity of worlds. To match something like this, how can I match something? No, we don't believe in worlds. So how do you then bring something? Have you heard of poetry competition in rap battles and so on?
Yeah, yeah. So
They won't be able to bring anything like it. So when the Quran said, give you another one from the same chapter 1 of the Quran.
yeah.
Maliki Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment. Now in Arabic linguistic social corpus, you cannot be master of time. You cannot be the owner of a second or a minute or an hour or a month or a day or an year. Okay? You can't be a master of 2011. You can't own time. So when the Quran says God is the master, the owner of the day of judgment, wow, how can you bring something like it? So this is how the linguistic, I just told you in English, the challenge is in Arabic, of course, and it's appreciated in the Arabic language. The Arabs were unable to bring and imitate anything like the Quran. Why would, throughout 14 centuries, scholars in the Arabic language?
So was it simplified in a way? It's simplified to reach more people, is that what you mean?
No. It came in a way so that people can see the evidence obviously clear.
Yeah.
That you cannot then quarrel that it's not from God. Because there has to be a perpetual message with perpetual evidence for it. When Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, parted the Red Sea, those people who witnessed it, it wasn't evidence against them or for them. Those who didn't believe it, it wasn't against them, because they knew that no one can part the sea. It is a miracle indeed. You can hide and you can lie about it, you can joke about it, but no one can do that. Neither can Pharaoh, all his magicians cannot do that. So it was an evidence that this is a messenger of God doing an act of miracle with the permission of God. You should believe in him then, because now this is an evidence for his belief, for his message. To us now, I haven't witnessed it. I cannot really appreciate this miracle. I wasn't there. So it is not a perpetual miracle for all people at all times, because people can question. I wasn't there, I didn't see it. Did it really happen? People can question all of that, right? But the people who've seen it, it was a witness, they witnessed it. It was clearly and ambiguously an evidence for them or against them. The Quran has many miracles or proofs and evidence for its message. This one is a perpetual miracle or an evidence for the Quran, that no one can match the Quran, back then, today, or in the future. Something that people can really handle and say, look, I can try it. Some Arabs started to begin, and then they fail even to begin. They realize this is not the words of a human being. Because I'll give you an example to appreciate. You see those buildings over there, right? Hotels.
Yeah.
What are they made of? They're made of stones and bricks, right? Bricks, cements, and so on and so forth. If you go closely, you will see the bricks are touching each other and they're connected with each other. It's cement or some kind of things, yeah? Now, if I told you I can make a building and none of you, the architects, today or in the future can make it, and I give you my building, and you see in close inspection, the building is made of bricks, but none of the bricks are touching each other. They're floating in space. Whole walls, floors, and ceilings like that. You can actually take your fine thing and all around it. Do you think any architect today can make a building like that? Impossible. Because all bricks are floating each other without any connectivity from the other. You can't make building like this. It's impossible. It's defying gravity. It's defying the laws of logic, laws of physics. You can't do that. When the Quran came and says, look, this Quran is in your own language, in your own alphabets, in your own language, language of the Arabs. Produce something like it, but it came in a form, in the structure, like the ones I explained, they cannot bring within that structure at all. They realize it is impossible to emulate, impossible to imitate, impossible to replicate. And that's why they became Muslims by the Quran only, by reading the Quran, by listening to the Quran. So this is what the Quran gives as an evidence for itself. but you may not appreciate because you don't speak Arabic and you're not an Arab, then the Quran gives you various other examples of falsification tests. Proof which acts as a falsification test. That if you were to apply those tests and you falsify it, then you can be sure that this Quran is not from God. I would like that, where I find scriptures can be assessed like this and we can falsify it, or we can then justify that these are indeed from God. The book gives you these tests. So the Quran says, had this book been from any other than God, Allah, you shall certainly find within it many ikhtilafan, many discrepancies, many inconsistencies, many errors. Oh, there you go, we have it. And we agree, if such a book was from God, talking about history, talking about the past, present and the future, talking about science, biology, botany, astrophysics, economics, talking about so many things, talking about God, heaven, hell, righteousness, you would expect, if it was from a human being, given over a period of 23 years, to contradict and to have discrepancies. That's the nature of people. I now say something which I have retracted from what I said 20 years ago, because I have come to learn more. Yep, I grow in knowledge and wisdom. That's what people do. The Quran was given in a period of 23 years. All of the Quranic material is of the same standard. It doesn't need to change. It's like it's coming from, given at all at once, a book, but just given piecemeal later. How is it that this Quran is free from contradictions? You'll find in the internet many pages written contradictions of the Quran. But if you go closely and inspect them and examine them, they all come to a point of problems with translations, problems of not understanding what it says. None of them amount to, this is what Muslims are claiming and boasting, a contradiction. Because you should find internal contradictions between the Quran if it was not from God. This is what the Quran is saying. So, once I was looking at a web page and they had about 90 or so, almost 100 contradictions. Okay, fine. Look at each one, because when you come in Speaker's Corner, you need to deal with this contradictions.
Right.
So, I wasn't convinced with any one of them. One or two I needed to go into the languages. Oh, okay, of course. It's the keys in the language itself. The language tells you what it means. Translation loses the message.
Fine. Translation, yeah.
So I said, okay, fine. You know what? This website is translated in German, maybe, and also in Arabic. Ah, now we can see how many of those contradictions are in the Arabic page. 3 or 4. Why? Why do they not have all of them together? Because why? When you do that in Arabic, it doesn't even amount to contradiction. Yeah? And those ones, one of them was like, oh, the Quran calls the father of Abraham, which they think is an uncle father. But the Arabs call their uncles, use the word ab, like a father. That's how they addresses it. And if you think about it, this is one of the points that one of the scholars made, I think Mutawalli Shawrawi, that look, would you say, oh, and Abraham spoke to his father Azar, or something like this, would you even name? Why would you name the father? Because you have one father, you don't have to name him. That means that word is used, not used in the sense that it is using, and it's highlighting and it's bringing to the understanding of how this close-knit relationship between father and uncle in the family was. Would you say, oh, have you spoken to your dad, David? Why do I need to name your dad, David? Have you spoken to your dad? So this is the significance. So then, of course, then people then say, okay, fine, so a contradiction. This is quite interesting. A book revealed from an illiterate person talking about science. There should be a scientific mistake in there, right? Because science evolves. Science, we learn as we grow in our knowledge and technology. So if it says something about science then, it must have been proven to be a mistake now. Like how people used to believe that the world was flat, how people believed in various things now we know to be untrue. The Quran talked about many things. The Quran says how the universe was joined together as a one piece and God parted it asunder. Actually, science is now telling us that this is the case. The universe wasn't all there was all the time. It was actually one united piece and there was an explosion and the universe is expanding. The Quran says, and God brought every living thing from water. That's what science is now saying. Actually, the source of life, you have to look for water. But this is coming from a man who was in a desert. there was hardly any water, and he's saying every living thing is from water. Totally opposite to common sense.
Yeah.
So things that the Quran says, you expect it to get it wrong, either science or from history. At one point the Quran says, you know what, the Pharaoh at the time of Joseph, the Quran doesn't use the word Pharaoh. It says king. And when it talks about other prophets like Moses, it says Pharaoh. So does what many people used to think, they're all pharaohs. But now with our knowledge of ancient Egyptology, we know during the time period where we think Prophet Joseph's reign was, they were not called pharaohs, they were kings. The title Pharaoh came much later. Yeah. How does the Quran bypass this and make that distinction when the Bible doesn't even distinguish it? Bible calls all on the Pharaoh. Had this Quran been plagiarizing and borrowing from other scripture, it should take the information because that's what everyone believed. But the Quran says no. The Quran talks about various things which, like the cities that was lost, that was not even found, like one of the cities of Iran. I actually went there in Syria in 2001 or 2, long time ago, and went to the place where they found these tablets. It's a place called Tel Marduk or Ebla, where they found one of these tablets. You know how you have cuneiform tablets and so on, they used to have all these transactions or history written in those tablets. This is the way they used to write.
Yeah.
And they were saying, oh, these people, they dealt in businesses, the people of Iran. So it was a known place, known enough to be a city of having a transaction. That was totally unknown to history. This particular passage in the Quran, like Iram Dhatil Imad, people said, historical error in the Quran by some of the critics of Islam.
Right.
When that information came, we don't hear anything about it at all, because now we should be asking them. We were so sure that this city never existed. How do you now account rationally? How did Prophet Muhammad know this in the Quran? When to our knowledge it didn't even exist. It's only when we excavate and unearth our history from the relics and artifacts from the past underneath the grounds, in the remains, archaeological remains.
Yeah.
Then you realize whether it's history, whether it's science, the Quran, the information it gives, how does it get it all right? Now think about it for the sake of statistical probabilities. If the Quran was from a brilliant mind, maybe he's a genius, right? This is the argument of genius. If he was a genius, first thing, you should be able to match something like it with all the helps. Bring a chapter like it. Okay, that doesn't work. But what about the things else he says? Maybe he was a genius, he worked it out, or maybe he did a guesswork too. Okay, so you can do by guesswork, one thing right, two things right, few things right. And if you know mathematics well, you know the science of probability. If you have one situation, you want to get it both right, the probability is 50-50, 1 in 2, 1 over 2. 50% chance to get it right, 50% chance to get it wrong. Yeah? If you have one situation.
Yeah.
If you have two situations, to get both of them right, the probability is 1 over 2 times 1 over 2. It's 1 over 4. Yeah? That's how it goes. So your probability becomes more and more not to get it right. So you have 1 chance to get it right and 3 chances to get it wrong, if you have 2 situations. If you have 20 situations to get it all right, the probability is almost about 1 million to get it wrong and 1 chance to get it right. So the probability of getting it right is 1 against 1 million. So if the Quran gives you more than 20 situations and all of them are right, million chances to get it wrong and 1 chance to get it right, and the Quran got it right. Something else is going on there. It is not a matter of probabilities of guesswork. Quran gives more than 20. I'm just giving you a figure which roughly amounts to 1 million. Okay, I did the calculation. If you look in 1 over 2 times, you come to a point where 20 situation comes to around 1 million. So he wasn't then doing a guesswork. Even if you have a guesswork, let's apply some guesswork. Describe me a mountain in your own words. Oh, it's an elevation in the ground, maybe quite high, right? That's what majority of people will say. The Quran says mountains are like pegs. When you go camping and you put a peg underneath the ground, how much of the peg is overground and how much is underground? Much of it is underground.
Underground, yeah.
Much of it underground.
Yeah.
The Quran is saying, Quran is saying mountains are like pegs, meaning if the mountains, much of it is underground. Did you know that this is the case?
No.
Most mountainous range, what we see is like a tip of the iceberg. Most of it is actually, most of it is like underground.
Yeah.
Now, can you go to a near mountain and dig up and find this information? Even today? No, you can't. With our sonars, when you beam the sonar, and we can find out the depth of it. Okay? Technology is from today. 1400 years ago, how would someone know this information? So, common sense tells you, even as a guesswork, you won't make this guess, you'll make a guesswork to the opposite, to the other thing. And the Quran gives you this information. When the Quran says about how the baby is born from a sperm that is emitted, the sexes are determined there. The boy or a girl is determined in the male secretion. Do you know what they used to believe? They used to believe the human beings is actually fully formed, it's called the preformation theory, fully formed in the sperm of a man, and when it goes into the woman's womb, with the blood, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So a whole fully human being, either in the egg or in the sperm, and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the baby is born.
But it's determined by the mother.
Yeah. Even in the 17th century, when they invented the microscope by Van Leeuwenhoek, 1753 or 63, they claim they can see this exactly, and they drew it. It's like this shape, and there's a whole human being at the top, folded like this. But of course, we know that's true, not true. But that was a belief even in the 17th century. Even with this microscope, you won't be able to see these things, but they said they claimed they did, and the Quran says no. The baby is born in successive stages, one creation after the other, and the sexes of the baby is determined in the manihi yumna, the ones which is emitted by the male secretion. We know that in the male secretion, the sperm carries the chromosomes, the X and the Y.
So that's mentioned in the Quran, is it?
No, Quran doesn't say X or Y chromosome.
No.
It says He created the male and the female from the emission from the sperm that has been emitted.
The determination.
Yeah. So now we realize the man and the woman is already determined from the male secretion. So what makes it determined? Because the man, if he provides the Y chromosome from this in the sperm, it becomes a boy. If he doesn't, just provide the X with the woman's X chromosome, it becomes a girl. Okay?
Right.
So the Quran is telling you something even to this level of detail, where our understanding of these are very recent. Very recent. I am not saying this is a miracle. I am saying at least consider this to be interesting and amazing for you to reflect and study, something to study further. Saying, how would a man living in a desert without any tools of this nature describe these kind of things, and not even illiterate, and says, I am a servant of God, slave of God, only come to tell you to worship God, Him, God alone, no one else, not me. Worship God. I'm only a messenger conveying this message. People in the past, when they studied these kind of things, they told him, they made him like, he is one of the most successful leader in the world, most successful scientist, philosopher, successful statesman. You make him everything apart from the most successful or the last messenger or a prophet of God. Okay, that's all he's claiming to be. I am a messenger of God. Okay, come to tell you to worship God. Yeah. So what you, as a very inquiring, truth-seeking individual, your role would be to use your intellect that God has given, and to say, okay, let me go and read and study and reflect on this. If I find convincing, I'm going to accept it. If I find this is something totally man-made or from other than God and so on, you have in all means to reject it. But you have to examine it with proper care. That's why the Quran says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Have they not pondered over the Quran with care? Not just superficial reading. So the Quran is demanding that you read with care and attention. And if you do that, of course, the evidence will be unfolding in front of you. That's what the Quran is saying. That Allah says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. We shall soon show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. So we have a promise from God that God will show us signs within the horizons and within ourselves that this is the truth. Islam is the truth. The Quran is the truth. You know how the Quran deals with reason. People say, look, when we are rotten, our flesh are rotten, we are bones only, and you say we're going to be resurrected again? Quran says, even if you become like this, He is able to bring back like the tips of your own fingers. Nothing special, or is there something special about the tips of our fingers? What are we using our tips for today in forensic science? Because it's unique. Our fingerprints are unique. The Quran is saying, it doesn't matter whether you're rotten, you're wasted away, no flesh, bones are broken. God is going to bring you back as unique as you are, like the tip of your fingers. Point number one. Point number two, you doubt resurrection? Consider how God created you. In the first place, He created you from this, from that, from this, and the transformation of these stages is given. This is how He will resurrect you again. So now scientifically, when we understand how babies are born, God is telling us 1400 years ago, He created you like this. He's going to create you like this again next time. Will that be a problem? No problem. He says, which is difficult to create? You, أنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها. What is more difficult to create? Create you or the universe? Of course, the whole universe. So if God could create the universe, well, how is it difficult to create you? Not only that, look at the levels of reasons Quran gives. He created you أول مرة, first time, and He will create you again. When He created you first time and He describes you, if someone creates something first time, this camera, is it difficult to create second time? It's much easier. Quran is saying, think. He created you first time. Why do you think He's unable to create you second time? It's even easier, isn't it? So the Quran reasons with us if we didn't believe. This particular point about أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. It says, have the unbelievers not known or seen that the heavens and the earth was joined together as one piece and God parted it asunder, and God brought every living thing from water? Would they then not believe? My focus is on the first and the last point. It's not addressing the Muslims. It's addressing those who don't believe yet. It's giving something in the middle. And at the end it says, would you then not believe? Would you still not believe? Would you then not believe? Wow. It's asking us, are you still not going to believe when you didn't believe in the first place, and give something to think and reflect and reason in the middle? What are the things given in the provided? One from astrophysics, one from biology. The cosmology of our universe, that we will understand the current understanding that the universe was not always there, but it was united in one singularity, and it was with a huge separation. We called it Big Bang. So Quran uses the word rataq and fataq. In the Arabic language, rataq and fataq is like, forceful separation. Okay? This is what the Quran is describing, how it was from the singularity, it was then separation. And the Quran also talks about how the universe is, God is expanding it. He is the expander. The way it says, He is the one who's the expander, meaning He's continuously expanding it. Again, does it conflict with modern science? Science is saying it's expanding, but is it going to contract? But the Quran goes even further. It says, in the end times, God will roll back the universe like a scroller's roll. So there will be another big crunch. The Quranic teaching of the cosmology is, it's expanding from the singularity, and then it will be again contracting.
Contract,
Yeah, and then there will be another universe another world. I mean, this is what we're saying. This world that God will create eventually is bigger than this world. This is where paradise
It is controlled by Allah.
God is in control of everything, yes. So the point I'm making here is look at the way Quran reasons with people of knowledge and intellect. It simply says, look, have you not known this? Actually, today, we could say, yes, we know this, that the universe was like one piece. But then they didn't know. Okay? They would just believe merely, oh, is it the case? Now they believe about every living thing and say, would you not don't believe? Now how can we now, knowing this information today, still not believe in it? This is those who don't believe, the role what's playing of their mind and the intellect is one of stubbornness and arrogance. And the Quran says, don't be an arrogant like Satan. Satan was an arrogant, stubborn. He saw God created Adam and gave him life and says, look, bow down to him as a sign of respect. He says, no, I'm not going to bow down to one who you made with clay and you made me from fire. So his pride came in. So Quran says, no, there's no room for no place for pride. You humble yourself to God. Many are atheists today. Do you know why they're atheists? They don't want to humble themselves to a creator which is greater than themselves. Like how can there be a creator who created all this? No one created all this. This is the pride and arrogance and stubbornness some people have. That's stopping them from believing. The Quran says, no. You humble yourself because you were nothing. The Quran says, do you not recollect and remember that at one point you were nothing? You were nothing. We were nothing at one point. Absolutely nothing. And then we came into this existence. God gave us sight and hearing so that we can be grateful to God. We can be grateful and thankful to God. So God, our God, Allah, does not demand us blind faith. So far I've given you are things to reason and ponder and reflect with, so that you can be sure in your heart and your mind what you believe is true. So you're convinced rationally, intellectually, and spiritually. Not just somebody says, believe, you're gonna get better, you'll be healed. No, if you do believe in the true belief, of course, the Quran says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." Surely, in the remembrance of Allah, in God, the hearts finds tranquility. And you will see when you're connected with God, nothing will make you into despair. You will be tranquil, you'll be patient, you'll be safe. You are not going to take your own life away saying, oh, look what's happened, I lost my job. No, because you will have that peace and tranquility. You know why you were created here for. You were not created to be successful in this life with getting the best job and so on. I mean, you were created to fulfill the purpose in this life. So the purpose may have been that, you don't have the jobs like some people have, and yet you still can sustain your life from the provisions of God. If you have this ultimate reliance on God, provisions will come to you from nowhere. There are hundreds of stories like this. They have ultimate reliance on God. They had nothing, they're totally poor. There's a story from, this is many of true stories like this, but it's important to understand that people often, belittle these things. There was a man, a daughter, and her daughter, very poor, no means to get any medicines or food. On that day at night, they had no food. She had a high temperature. I think man or woman, maybe grandmother or grandfather, right? Because it's a true story, I can't remember exactly, grandfather or grandmother. She's crying and high temperature. What she's doing is using the clothes, putting water, like you do how you do cold press the towel, and that was getting very hot. She's saying, how can we even get this? She's saying, okay, no. She still said, okay, God will help us. This is the faith they have. She didn't give over, say, how can God abandon us? How can you abandon us from this? How can you give all this poverty? How can you have no food for us and disease and so on? They have none of this. They're patient and they're thankful for what they have. It's okay, God has given us this adversary and He will remove it. What happened? Knock on the door. What? I'm a doctor. Where's your daughter? They're like astonished. What's happening? He goes in there. As a doctor, he finds this girl, gives him gives the daughter medicine, because they carry the medicines with them normally when they go out, and she, temperature is come back into normal, and then says, this is the prescription, go and get this load, and here's my bill. Says, we didn't call you. We can't pay for you. We don't have this money.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hope this video was helpful for you. This may help others too, so please consider sharing, and we will bring more videos in the future, inshallah. So consider subscribing and you won't miss any. Jazakallahu khairan.